Hi, my name is Hugh. I am a senior developer advocate at Ivan and former codebar student of many years ago. So it's a real privilege to be able to come back today and speak at the festival. Today, we're going to be talking about how to write and publish your first blog post. This workshop is intended to get developers and aspirational developers bootstrapped on the process of writing and publishing blogs. There's some advice here for non-technical writing and technical writing and a little bit in between. This workshop has practical exercises. There are 3 in total. If you want to follow along with the exercises this session, you will need a GitHub account. If you don't have one already, don't worry. It's super easy to create one, and you can do that now by going to github.com. You can also find written instructions for all the exercises that we'll be using in this session at github.com/notanotherpizza/blog/workshop. My glamorous assistant Tibbs has just shared a link to that in the chat. More about them in a moment. You're welcome to read ahead and work through the exercises at your own pace if you wish. And there are some challenges at the end if you get through everything before the end of the workshop time. But I'll be walking through the exercises step by step. And you can always refer back to the workshop materials if you get stuck. The session materials have written instructions for all 3 exercises, links to some useful resources, and crucially, a link to this slide deck. So if you need to go back and check anything, it's all there. So as promised, we have 2 hosts today. Myself, I'm Hugh, as I already said. I'll be leading the session. And then Tibbs, who is my colleague from Ivan. Tibbs is an expert on all things documentation and is a wonderful human being. They'll be in the chat if you need any help. So in this workshop, we're going to be digging into why write blogs as a developer or aspiring developer, tips for coming up with ideas for what to write about, some advice on writing drafts and getting feedback on them, and we're going to dive into some of your options for publishing your work. As promised, there will also be some practical exercises, and by the end of this session, you will have drafted and published your own mini blog. 90 minutes is not quite enough time to write a full-length blog, so we're just going to have some fun and write something short and sweet and look at the steps in drafting and publishing. And then hopefully you'll be able to translate that into writing a full-length blog after the session. So let's get right into it. Why write blogs? Writing for pleasure or writing without the professional or academic pressures that can sometimes come with writing is generally a really great way to get better at writing. If you're pursuing a career in engineering, you're probably getting a lot of advice from different people who are like, oh, you should be doing this or you should be doing that. And there's lots of competing demands on your attention. But working on your writing and working on your writing publicly is a very useful way of both getting better at writing, which is a very core skill to engineering. Like we write code, but also we're writing documentation, writing features and proposals. But also because in a world where the job market is increasingly saturated with AI slop, and it's a nightmare for both job seekers and people looking to hire, writing blogs about personal project and your work can help attract the attention of potential employers. It's also really handy if you're asked to provide evidence of your work, if you have a portfolio of writing about past projects that you can easily share. My favorite reason to write blogs, though, is how the process of writing can help contribute to learning new things. If you're the kind of person that likes making fancy notes while studying, like you have lots of pens and highlighters and stuff, you're probably already familiar with this experience. But the process of writing something down while you're learning can really help with the retention of information. And you can revisit that writing later on to jog your memory about what you're learning. But I think the coolest thing of all is that you can share your writing with other people and help teach them the same things that you learned. I think this is very cool. This is personally my favorite kind of writing to do, kind of falling into the pattern of I learned something cool, here it is, and here's what you can do with it. When it comes to choosing what to write about, I think the best advice I've been given is write something that you want to read. Writing stuff for yourself is great, and making notes and keeping records of things you've learned so you can refer back to it later is awesome. But if you want to write something other people will read, write something that you enjoy reading. Write about topics that you find interesting, and try and write in a way that is fun to read. More on how you can do that in a little bit. And also write something that you enjoy writing about. As I mentioned a couple of slides ago, you get a lot of advice as an engineer about things you can do to contribute to your career. Lots of people will encourage you to write. And it can feel like a lot of work, particularly on top of the day job, to be writing and creating content. So I would encourage you to, when picking something to write about something that you find fun. Like, treat writing as a leisure activity. Don't push yourself into writing about like very technical topics. Don't feel that you need to be doing kind of like, oh, like I'm going to deep dive into this. Like, you can be writing about like silly projects or just fun things. And indeed, in this session, there's no obligation to write about anything technical at all. Another great place to look for ideas of what to write about is to look at other people's blogs. Shameless plug for my own blog here, but there are some other great blogs on this list. The codebar blog is very cool. Then there's people like Armoff and Willow, Leo, who was instrumental in helping to make this workshop happen, and Carly Richmond are all like awesome blogs with a variety of ideas, people doing a mixture of technical and non-technical writing. And there's some good stuff in there about writing as well. And in general, I would say if you're looking to get started in writing, look at the stuff you enjoy reading, look at what people are building, what they're writing, and draw inspiration from that. I really struggle when I'm writing starting from a blank slate. Like, maybe I have an idea for what I want to write, but I have that blank piece of paper in front of me. It's very difficult to start. There is a fantastic resource on writing blogs called Writing for Developers by Peter Osana and Cynthia Dunlop. Came out last year. It's very good. And they talk about the idea of blog patterns. So this is the idea that technical blogs fall into a number of distinct categories and they all share sort of common structures. So I mentioned on the previous slide, writing about things you've learned and sharing that. So that might be an example of like a Today I Learned type blog, where, it's a memo to your future self about something you want to remember. Or perhaps it's I Found a Thing, where you want to share something interesting that you discovered. Either way, if you look online for examples of I Found a Thing blog or examples of Today I Learned blog, you can see other people's blogs and you can see the structures that they've used. And borrowing those structures can be a really good way to get started, and to have some kind of skeleton of a blog to work back from rather than just a blank piece of paper. Some other great examples are compare and contrast. So thinking about like 2 ways to solve a problem and why you might prefer one approach. A bug hunt. So perhaps you're working on a project or an exercise and there's a bug and you have to track it down and figure it out. Sharing that journey and how you solve that problem is both useful for your own learning, as I mentioned before, but is also a great way of engaging with other people because you're sharing how to fix a problem and people really appreciate that, I often find. Finally, another great pattern, and one that might be good for today's exercise, is my experience at. So a write-up of a conference or a meetup, thoughts and highlights, that kind of thing. Whenever I travel to a conference for work, I often write something like this, where I'm like, oh, here are other people's talks that I saw that were really cool. Here were conversations that I had. So you could write one for Codebar Festival, being like, here are the sessions I went to, here are the ones I found interesting, and here's what I'd like to see next year. So something like that. And again, you can find examples of these patterns really easily online just by searching for pattern name and like blog. And this idea is adapted from Writing for Developers, which is a book that you can find at all good booksellers. So we've done a whistle-stop tour of the process of ideation for blog writing. We are now going to do our first exercise. So we're going to take 5 minutes and we're going to write down a list of some potential topics or ideas that we could write a very small blog post about today. So, as I said before, pick something that you'd enjoy writing about or reading. And after 5 minutes, I'm going to ask everyone to share one of their ideas. Capture your idea in maybe a proposed title or a short sentence, like these ones are on the right. So some ideas to get you started would be something like what I learned at Codebar Festival 2026, which would be an example of my experience app pattern, fixing an out-of-memory error in my first Java app, which is a bug hunt pattern, my favorite coffee shops to work at, which I think would be a fun idea, and then a compare and contrast of my experiences of learning Node.js versus Dino. So take 5 minutes, grab a post-it note or open a text file in another tab, write down a few ideas, and then we will circle back in 5 minutes and share a few. Okay, so we'll take a couple more minutes. I'm just going to put up a Slido, which we'll use in today's session. So once you've come up with some ideas, you can join the Slido via this link or by scanning this QR code. Thank you, Tibbs. And we can share some of our ideas. So I'll give everyone a minute to grab that Slido link or scan the QR code, and then we will move on. Okay, so if I jump on to this next slide, if everyone could share one of the ideas they have come up with, that would be amazing. We have one here already. Rewrite an app in Zig, which is a cool idea. I'll admit to not realizing that Zig was a real programming language for a very long time. I just thought it was kind of a joke name, but no, it's real. It's a re-implementation of C, I think. Why you should attend Codebar Festival. Great idea for a blog. What I learned at the Women in Tech Hackathon, attending the second time. My blog is built with Ruby and Jekyll. Is this dated? That's a really good idea for a blog, particularly given what we're going to come up to in the next part of the exercise. My experience using S3 CloudFront versus AWS Amplify. It's a great idea. My experience is learning data analytics for Google certifications. Programmer, humor, and puns. I'm looking forward to this one already. Events I've been attending to learn about AI and what I have been learning. How I learned to solve a Rubik's Cube in my 30s. Very fun. A beginner's guide to using GitHub Pages. Another great one for this blog in particular. Why I write my slides in types. I have a sneaking suspicion I know who that is from. Awesome. These are all absolutely brilliant ideas. How to learn Python in Linux Terminal. What I unlearned and relearned. Very fun. Just to give everyone a few more moments. I think we have 36 people in the call. I like native text, not the clothing material. Very fun. I think we have 36 people on the call, so I will give everyone a couple more seconds to share their ideas. How I vibe coded my first AI app. Very nice. Here's everything I Googled in 24 hours. Ooh, that's fun. Started writing my first blog post. Meta. I like that. What I learned to Codebar Festival. How to publish your first blog post. I've recently realized that writing is something I need to do to publish my ideas. Ah, very nice. This is great stuff. When planning this session, I was really worried that people might be a bit stuck in 5 minutes to come up with ideas, but frankly, most of these are better than the things I write about for work, so you're doing great. Awesome. So I think that's 16, so I think that's about half the group. So how I learn AI, awesome. So let's move on to the next step. Cool. So now that we have some ideas for what to write about, and I'd strongly encourage you to have a look at the Slido and have a look at the ideas that other people have shared for inspiration. Let's talk a little bit about the writing process. And more importantly, let's talk about the first draft. So writing a draft can be a very intimidating thing, right? You're starting from a blank piece of paper or a blank editor window, and you've got to put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard. I can't encourage you strongly enough to, when you're in that very beginning part of the blog post writing process, to just write. Make a messy initial draft and refine it later. Don't worry about perfect grammar or word choice or structure. Get your ideas on the page and you can refine and get feedback later. I also appreciate that it's a bit of a draw the rest of the owl advice to say, like, just write. So some tips for writing a first draft that I often use in my own work is to start with an abstract. So what do I mean by that? So in an abstract, whether it's for a blog post or an article or a conference talk, it's maybe a short paragraph, a few sentences explaining what it is you're going to be talking about, why you're talking about it, and what people would hope to gain from reading your blog or listening to your talk. So an abstract is a nice way to capture your initial ideas. So if we were doing an abstract for a blog about Codebar Festival, it might say something like, I went to Codebar Festival hoping to learn more about front-end development or JavaScript programming. I planned on attending the following sessions. My hope was that I'd learn the following things. And here's what you can learn about Codebar Festival by reading my blog. So that might be an example of an abstract. Starting from a blank slate, starting with an abstract can be really useful for just getting your ideas down initially on paper and starting to think about the direction of what it is you're going to write about. Next, for the structure of a draft, I'd encourage you to keep things super simple. But the most basic structure that I always use for writing, and I encourage other people to use too, is thinking about something with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So once you've written your abstract, that can very quickly morph into your introduction or your beginning. So an opening few sentences that are like, in this blog, I'm going to be talking about this. Here's why you should read, kind of hooking in your reader to the rest of the piece. Then in the middle, you expand upon and explore the ideas that you mentioned in your introduction. So again, coming back to our Codebar Festival example, it might be each paragraph or a couple of paragraphs is an account of your experience at a particular workshop or talk with your thoughts on it. And then at the end, you conclude your piece by summarizing what it is you've covered in the middle and addressing any questions that you raised in the beginning. So if I had written my blog to say, I hope to learn more about JavaScript, these are the workshops I attended, here's my experience at them, I might end by saying, whilst I learned this thing about JavaScript that I wanted to learn, I still find the concept of this in JavaScript very confusing, so I'd like to learn more about that in future, but I still had an awesome time at Codebar Festival, and I'd recommend other people go too. So that gives you that structure is super useful because it's very flexible, it's very simple, but also it means that you have an idea of how to go about building and finishing a first draft. Once you've got that beginning, middle, and end, you know you've got something kind of blog shaped that's going to be able to be reviewed and shared. I am not someone with a background in writing. My training is as an engineer, and I've learned about writing over the years through that lens. So if you're someone who's familiar with the process of planning and writing essays, I'm sure this won't be very revolutionary, but I find it very useful. A really important piece of advice, I think, at the moment, especially in 2026, is when you're drafting, avoid using AI. Don't let AI replace your voice. When you're writing your draft, this is really a chance to write things in your own voice, to explain things the way they make sense to you, and to let your personality come through. You know, lean on your own skills and creativity in general, but especially when you're writing your first draft. The risk of using AI tools for writing is that they make everyone sound the same. I can't encourage you enough to write in your own voice, even if you don't think it sounds professional or polished, because it will make you stand out in the best possible way, which is as a human being with a story to share, lessons learned, or that desire to create and write. If you do use AI, and I would say there's nothing wrong necessarily with using AI later on in the process for reviewing and refining your drafts, use it as a tool, not as a ghostwriter. Don't replace the part of the writing, which is the creativity of coming up with ideas, of writing things in your own voice. But do use it maybe to say like, oh, I'm going to check to make sure I've punctuated this correctly, or that I don't have any sentences that break or something like that. But yeah, the least you use it, the less you use it rather, the better, because that means that you can preserve your voice. And that's a very important thing, I think, at the moment. Once you've created that first draft, you have your beginning, middle, and end, you have your ideas on the paper, even if it's rough and it's a little lumpy, it is time for editing and review. A very important thing to consider here, I think, is that reading is as important as writing when it comes to putting together a good post. So what I mean by that is both reading other people's work is a great way to learn how to write well and to flex the muscles that we use in writing. But when it comes to reviewing your draft, reading it back is one of the most important ways of improving it. If you can, reading your draft aloud is great because it will help you find sentences that are too long. It'll help you find phrasing that's awkward or doesn't make sense. And also, it's a great way to have things in your voice because you'll literally be reading it out in your voice with the way that you speak and capturing that on the page as you come in and change things. Reading is a great way to find lumpiness, to find things that don't work and to come back and change them in the editing process. Another great piece of advice, although this is often perhaps easier said than done, is to find a good reviewer or copy editor. So maybe this is a friend or colleague who writes professionally, who can kindly take a look at some of your work and share advice. But just as easily, it could be a family member or a partner who just gives things a quick read over and lets you know what they think. Sometimes if you're writing about a topic that you have expertise in, particularly if you're trying to write a blog post to teach people something, it's actually great to get someone who has no idea about that topic to read it, because you can check to see what you're actually succeeding in communicating to them. And in the editing process, I think this is one of the most important things to consider, is how do you want the reader to feel and what do you want to communicate to the reader? And when people are reviewing and reading your work, check in with them. Like, how do they feel about this piece? How does the tone come across? Is it fun to read? Is it serious? Are you trying to make it either of those things? And what do you want to communicate to the reader? If you are just writing a blog for fun, let's like, oh, I have this idea, I tried it out, it didn't work. Checking in with your reader to see if they've come with you on all the steps of that journey, if they've seen all the major beats you're trying to get across, is super useful. And again, if you're writing something to teach people something, letting them read it and coming back and asking at the end, like, oh, so what did you take away from this? What did you learn? Is a really great way to see if you're hitting the mark with that piece of writing. Similar to advice around avoiding AI, spell checkers and grammar checkers can be extremely useful, but don't be afraid to ignore these to protect your voice. Perhaps a little controversial, but there is this sense of like, perfect grammar and construction. But if you're trying to, for example, like make a joke by creating your own word, maybe you're cooking up a portmanteau, or you are using punctuation to get across your writing the way that you speak, then don't be afraid to leave that in. Like, correct grammar and spelling exists to help communicate consistently between people. But if that's getting in the way of you communicating your own voice and your ideas, then you can kind of get away with ignoring that a little bit. Finally, and we'll touch on this in the next slide about sharing your work, your draft will never be perfect. You'll always find a mistake after you publish. There will always be things to change and improve. So don't be afraid to share things early and get that feedback as soon as you can. When it comes to sharing your work, when you first start writing, it's likely the people who will read your work will be the people that you explicitly invite to. Like I say, don't be afraid to share your work early and then fix any issues in it, whether it's inaccuracies or spelling or grammar, based on the feedback from those people. The earlier you share, the easier it is to correct directionally. So perhaps like you're talking about things in the way that makes sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to other people, or there's another area that it'd be more interesting to explore. And getting that feedback early on can make it easier to correct the direction of the writing before you write your magnum opus, 10,000 words. It's very difficult to kind of wind that back. This, of course, can be slightly different if you're getting paid to write a story. But if you're just writing on your own time, you really can't get it wrong. Like type something out, share it, get feedback, rinse and repeat. And yeah, don't be afraid to publish early as well. So I would strongly encourage you to share your work early on with friends and colleagues. And when it comes to sharing your work on social media, there are a few best practices that's worth considering. Most platforms will expand link previews with an image. This is typically the first image in your blog or a specifically configured Open Graph image. Depending on the platform, these preview images will vary a lot. There's some great resources online, like if you search like, best preview image Facebook size or Medium or YouTube or whatever, it'll tell you roughly the dimensions that you need. And then you can create a preview image, maybe with the title of your blog or a nice image from your blog, such that when people share links to your blog, you make the best possible first impression. Different approaches work for different platforms, both because of technical limitations like image preview size, but also because of the different communities in these different places. A great example would be the most recent blog I published was about a security issue I had with my home lab on LinkedIn and Blue Sky and Medium. The response was pretty positive. People are like, oh, you're sharing a mistake and your learnings from that mistake in securing your home lab. But on Reddit, a community which is prone to more, shall we say, more cynical perspectives, people were very quick to find fault with some of the writing and some of the steps I'd taken that caused the security issue. So when you're sharing your work, it's worth considering whom you're sharing it with and what you can do to make the best possible first impression. So on some platforms like Reddit, that might be sharing things in quite an informal way without the polish or preview graphics at all, and just sharing something as like, oh, here's something I've done. Here's something I've done. It's very like informal. And other platforms like LinkedIn or the site that's formerly known as Twitter or Blue Sky, having a good preview image and having something that's engaging and colorful can really draw people in. Like we're consuming content with our eyes, so it's useful to build things that are visual. And yeah, if there's one thing you take away from this slide, it's share your work early and get feedback early, because none of this is set in stone. If you publish something online, you can always come back and change it later. So we've spoken a little bit about creating our draft, getting reviews, turning it into a blog post, editing and refining, and sharing it. I want to talk a little bit about DIY blog hosting. There's a lot of different ways that you can publish your blog and share your blog posts. But I think increasingly, as platforms become sort of more disparate, kind of walled gardens, and it's difficult to move things across, having your own website where you can publish blog posts is arguably the best way of participating in the sort of the small web and of sharing your writing. This can be kind of expensive and maybe a little intimidating if you've not run a web server before. Like I said, like I mentioned before, I host my own website and I had security issues on my home lab. It wasn't the end of the world, but I did learn a lot in the process, and I've kind of come back to that and made some changes. But there's lots to consider. I'd like to touch on one great option that you have for creating your own blog, which is using GitHub Pages and a static site generator. So you might already be familiar with GitHub as a web application for managing Git repositories, where you can collaborate on projects and you can build things and you can share your code. GitHub have this amazing feature where you can enable something called GitHub Pages, which effectively turns your GitHub repo into a publicly available web server. So any of the content, any of the HTML files or CSS or whatever in that repo can then be reached publicly on the internet as if it were a web server. This is great, but I don't think anyone wants to blog directly in HTML. Like, it's a little clunky. So a great option for publishing blogs to a repo and having them available as content is using something called a static site generator. So SSGs take some kind of text or documentation, and then they turn it into static HTML, which your browser will then render as a website. A very common form of the text that's input to these systems is Markdown, which is a lightweight markup language that helps you annotate text and describe what it should look like. That all gets funneled into the SSG and turned into HTML. And then GitHub Pages can deploy those HTML files and make them available as a website. And this is an awesome way of creating your first blog. It's free, it's super easy, and you'll learn a lot about GitHub and open source in the process. One final thing I'd like to touch on, as I mentioned before, is the idea of like small web. So this is like individual people hosting their own small websites, sharing the work they're on, rather than having to rely on big platforms like Facebook or Medium, Substack or whatever. Publishing on your own site doesn't mean that you can't use those platforms. And indeed, I'd encourage you to look into an approach for publishing called POSSE, which stands for Post Own Site Syndicate Everywhere, as you can see in this lovely kind of hand-drawn diagram here. The idea being is, look, you start off by publishing your own work on your own site, whether that's GitHub Pages or maybe you host your own web server with your blogs on it, where you own that content and you can control it. And any of your audience that come to you, you can keep emails, you can get in touch with them like that. And then if you want to promote your work on other big platforms where a lot of the eyes and traffic are, you can then repost it to those places so that you're bringing people from the big platforms, from the big walled gardens, to your own little site where you have more control and you're resistant to things like platforms changing the way they host blogs or putting up paywalls or anything like that. So POSSE is great. It's a cool project from an organization called the Indie Web. I thoroughly recommend checking it out. But for today, though, we're going to be talking about publishing your blog using Jekyll Markdown and GitHub Pages. So now we're going to do our second exercise. So using your idea from exercise 1, we're going to spend 15 minutes writing a rough first draft of your mini blog in Markdown. Again, don't worry about getting it perfect. The goal is just to get something down. As I mentioned before, Markdown is a lightweight markup language for adding formatting to plain text documents. For a full guide to Markdown syntax, check out markdownguide.org/basic syntax. I'm going to walk through this exercise. I'm going to write my own mini blog as well. And I can show you some of the Markdown features. And then at the end of 15 minutes, we will look at publishing our draft to our own mini blog feed. So I'm going to start doing that. Again, if you have any questions, just yell in the chat. And I am just going to change screens. So again, the joy of MacBooks is constantly clicking the, what do I want? Oh, show toolbar full screen, that's it, cool. It's always having to click around with Windows. So I'm going to jump over to the blog workshop repo. Thank you for sharing the link to IndieWeb, where you can see we have all of our documentation here. I definitely wasn't editing this an hour ago. So I'm going to look at exercises, and I'm going to look at exercise 2. And we have written instructions here for how to create your blog in Markdown. You can edit Markdown in pretty much any text editor. If you already have VS Code or something installed, that's a great way of doing it. If you are new to Markdown, a really useful tool, and the one I recommend here, is Markdown Viewer. So Markdown Viewer lets you edit Markdown on the left-hand side of the screen with all the different annotations, and I'll get into how those work in a moment, and then see what it'll look like when it's turned into static HTML on the right-hand side of the screen, which is super useful for learning and getting started. You can see I already have an example blog in here. If you want to look at the example and maybe start writing your draft by kind of hacking away at that, you can open this example link here, which Tibbs has also just shared, and it is a little bit of a monster because in the URL, I think it's encoding the text. If you are new to Markdown, if you scroll down in the exercises, you'll see there's a link here to the Markdown guide I mentioned previously, which explains some of the basics syntax. Obsidian is great. I like Obsidian a lot. And then there's also the example is again down here as well. So I am going to make use of some of this 15 minutes to write my own blog a little bit. So one thing I really like outside of work is the EMF festival. And I'm going to write a blog called Why You Should Go to EMF Camp. I'm just going to pull up my time in the other window so I can keep an eye on the time. Cool. Don't know why that's paused. Excellent. So I typed a title in here, and you'll notice that on the Markdown side of the screen, I've added this hash. So in Markdown, you have this concept of headings, which are exactly the same as the headings in HTML. So I have my main heading here with one hash. If I type 2 hashes, I can create a subheading. So I can say, what is EMF camp? And this is basically a H2 heading from HTML. This is a H1 heading. And I could even go as far as, H3, H4, H5 if I need to. But 2 levels is usually enough. So I can have a teeny tiny heading like this. So headings are a great way of clearly delimiting what parts of your blog are talking about what, and it can be very useful for making things readable. So I am going to talk about what is EMF camp, my favorite thing at EMF, and then I'm going to conclude by saying you should go to EMF. Okay, so we have some subheadings, this kind of like rough structure that I'm going to fill in, and I'm going to start with my abstract. So I'm going to say in this blog, and you'll notice that just plain text typed in just comes across as regular text on the right. So I'm going to say in this blog, I'll be talking about my favorite place in the world with no exaggeration. You're going to see how bad I am at spelling here. Apologies for that. EMF camp. I'll be digging into what EMF camp is, some of my favorite parts, and why I think you should go to. Okay, so we've got our basic text, we've got our subtitles and titles. Let's look at adding links. So as I said, Markdown lets you create this annotated text and turns it to HTML. So pretty much anything you can do in a website, you can do here. I'm going to add some formatting to this first paragraph, and I'm going to add some links. So I'm going to link to EMF camp, and I'm going to do that by putting square brackets around EMF camp, and that's going to tell Jekyll I'm going to make this a link. And then I'm going to put a pair of parentheses after the square brackets, and that's where my link will go. And you can see on the right, EMF camp has been selected as a hyperlink. So I'm going to go to the EMF camp website, and then I'm going to grab that link. I'm going to put it in here. Cool. So you can see I have added a link. And now if I click on this in the preview, it links to the website. Next up, I am going to apply some formatting to my text. So I said that EMF camp is my favorite place in the world. I want to italicize that for emphasis. So I'm going to put a pair of asterisks on either side, and you'll see that it puts that text in italics. If I want to really emphasize it, maybe I'll put it in bold, and I can use 2 doubled up asterisks to create bold text. I'm going to keep that italic for now. And I might in fact put why I think you should go to in bold, because I think you should really go to EMF camp because it's really fun. So I'm going to start writing the rest of my blog. What I think would really help convey the idea of what EMF camp is to a reader would be an image. So I'm going to add an image now. I'm going to do that by typing an exclamation mark and a pair of square brackets, and then a pair of parentheses. So this is similar to the link, but this time, instead of linking to another web page, I'm going to link to an image. So I'm going to go up to my browser. I'm going to go and find a picture of EMF camp 2024, which was my first EMF camp. Cool. And then I'm going to look for a cool picture. I like this one, and right click on it, and I'm going to copy the image address. So if you're not familiar with image addresses, they are like a web link to a web page, but they point to a specific asset, in this case, an image. And so I'm going to copy the image address. I'm going to come back to my Markdown viewer, and I'm going to add this link in the brackets here. And you'll see that we have linked to this image elsewhere on the web. You can also link to an image locally, although I don't think this preview lets you upload images. But if I were to do that, I would just put the file path to the image on my computer or my server here instead, rather than to a link to an image on the website. Because of course, if the person hosting this website changes what this image looks like, it'll change the image you see here. You'll notice that we have these empty square brackets. This is where your alt text goes. Alt text is very important. People who may struggle to see will often use screen readers, and screen readers will read out alt text as well as the text in the main body of the page. So I'm going to put an explanation here and say a picture of the laser show at EMF camp over the camping field at night. Another great thing to use alt text for is to credit where you got images from. So I'm going to say credit Marcus Noble. Okay, so we have an image, we have some text. I'm going to add a very quick explanation of what EMF camp is. EMF camp, electromagnetic field, is a 4-day long festival of hackers, makers, and creatives in Herefordshire, featuring workshops, live music, and a wonderful community. I could say a lot more about EMF Camp, but we're writing a mini blog, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. And then I'm going to move on to the next section. So I wrote my favorite thing at EMF. I'm actually going to write my favorite things at EMF, and I'm going to create a list. So there are a bunch of different options for how to create lists in Markdown. I'm going to jump back to the instructions, and I'm going to look at markdownguide.org and the basic syntax. So this is a great resource. You'll see it's already explained a lot of the things we've already used, like emphasis, headings, lists. Sorry, a list that we'll be using in a second, but also links and images. So I'm going to look at lists. I want to create a list of my favorite things ranked by what was my favorite. So I want a numbered list, and you can see that's how we create it in Markdown. This is the HTML that will create. So it's using an ordered list element. And then it shows you what it will look like when it's rendered on the right. So if I jump back over to Markdown Viewer, I'm going to create a list. I'm going to say my favorite thing. Oh, what was my favorite thing at EMF? So many good things. The GPS potato. Now, this is a fun one to explain. Can I find a picture of the EMF GPS potato on the internet? EMF camp. I'm gonna be so sad if I can't find a picture of this. Blast. Okay, I'll have to share a picture after the fact. But for context on this wacky festival, someone built a giant fiberglass potato with a little screen in it with a GPS readout that said how far away it was from a certain set of coordinates, and they just kind of hid it places at the festival. And if you found it, picked it up, and brought it to them following the GPS, they'd give you a prize. So that was very fun. It felt like going on a quest. I have so much time for that. I liked the GPS potato. I liked the blacksmithing workshop. What else did I like? I liked the talk about women in game development. I liked camping with Model Village. And I liked building and installation, which was the ASCII art photo booth, which did not work very well, but it was still a lot of fun to do. Okay, so our little mini blog is really shaping up. We have a list of things. We have this little, subheading with an image and some text. And now we're just going to conclude. So I think you should go to EMF because I think you should go to EMF because if you enjoy making, coding, music, and whimsical adventure, it's a great time. More than that, though, I think the community at EMF is amazing. And it really, and hopefully, you can now see why it's one of my favorite places. Cool. So this is a very rough draft. It's very short. I've not really expanded on some of the ideas I'm talking about. I don't think this is a very compelling explanation of why you should go to EMF or even how you go to EMF. But this is kind of what we're aiming for today, right? It's a mini blog, and we are just kind of playing around with Markdown and getting fingers to keyboard. So I'll give everyone a couple of more minutes to wrap up whatever they're writing. Feel free to keep working on this if you like, but we're going to move on to the next exercise in a couple of minutes, where we'll be publishing this blog to our little mini internal blog feed for Codebar Festival. And you can do some more work on it there if there's anything you'd like to add or refine. So this is my little blog, and I'm going to click up here at the top right, and I'm going to export it to Markdown for safekeeping. And you'll see it's ended up in my downloads as document.md. And now I'm going to hop over to the blog feed that we're going to publish to. So this is the Not Another Pizza website. This is a community group I'm a part of, and I will talk a little bit about it at the end. But if I jump down here to workshop blogs, you'll see we have this little feed of blogs just for the blog workshop. So there's an awesome blog here from Ellie, who's writing about cafe cruises and bicycles, which is super cool. There is an example blog that I wrote, and I and I did the image link wrong. So that gives you an idea of what these mini blogs are going to look like. And you can find this blog feed over at Not Another Pizza /blog workshop. So hopefully you've had a chance to write something down, because now we're going to move on to publishing it. Great, here we go, cool. So in this final exercise, we're going to raise a pull request to publish our blog to the Not Another Pizza blog workshop that I just shared, blog feed that I just shared. It's worth noting, this is a much longer exercise than the previous two, so don't worry if you don't finish it in the workshop time, although I think we should still have plenty. You can still follow the steps below and complete this exercise after the session. This exercise includes a step where you'll have to wait for someone to review your PR. Once you get to that step, please share your PR in the chat, and I can go through and review it. Nice, I'm just seeing that people want to go to EMF now. Fantastic. I'm happy to talk more about EMF after the session if people like. So do share your PR link in the chat when you get there, and we'll take a look. Tibbs and I can review and merge. But for those who don't know, a pull request or a PR is basically a way of requesting that the maintainers or the owners of a particular repository on GitHub pull your code changes into their main branch. A main branch is typically where the owners of the project will deploy code or blogs or documentation from. So in essence, raising a pull request against a repo like the one that hosts the Not Another Pizza website is effectively you requesting that we publish your blog. And in this exercise, we'll use the PR to do just that. So again, you can jump over to the exercises on the blog workshop repo and over to exercise 3, where all of the instructions for this section are hosted. We're going to be using Jekyll as a static site generator. We're going to use our existing blog that we've written in Markdown, and we're going to fork the Not Another Pizza site repo to raise our pull request and request that our blog is published. covering a lot of ground here, but I will walk through it step by step, so do feel free to follow along. This bit is a little fiddly, so there's also a video guide where I walk through it slowly. You can pause me or fast forward me to your heart's content to work through this step. I've lost you, Emma. I'm sorry. Hopefully, I will regain you in this next step. Okay. So we're going to walk through this one step at a time. So looking at the instructions in Blog Workshop exercise 3, you'll see there is this first step, which is fork the Not Another Pizza site repo by navigating to it and clicking fork. So Tibbs has shared this link in chat. You can also find it here in the workshop instructions. So I'm going to right click on this link and open it in a new tab. And you'll see here that we have the Not Another Pizza site repo. So this is where all of the code that makes this website over here work is hosted. Now, we can't just start making changes to this code, right? Like it's already published, it's already on the internet. If we made a change that it didn't work, it would get published right away, it would cause problems. So this repo is protected. Not just anyone can make changes to it. But because of the wonders of how open source works, anyone can make a copy of this repo and make changes on it. And that copy is what's called a fork. So we're going to create a fork by clicking up here, up here at the top right, where it says fork. I'm going to click that. And I'm going to wait a few seconds for it to catch up. And you'll see that we have this create a new fork screen. Do let me know if this is too small. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to ignore my SSO for now. That's fine. So we can leave all of these settings the same. You can edit the description if you want to say like, oh, I'm using this for the codebar workshop or something, but this is just for you so you can remember what this repo is for. And we're going to leave it to just copy the main branch because we only need main, which is what's already deployed. So I'm going to click create fork. And that might take a few seconds, so we're just going to wait for that. Cool. So we created a fork. And this is our own copy of the Not Another Pizza repo where we can make changes. A very common way of making changes to a repo that's on Git would be to clone it locally. You may already be familiar with this process if you've used Git before. So you click here in the top right, you go to local, you'd copy the URL to the repo and you click locally. And indeed, if you're comfortable with that process, I'd encourage you to do it. But in the session today, just to keep things super simple, we're going to do everything in the browser. So hopefully everyone has made it as far as forking the repo. It's following along. As Tibbs says, give us a wave in chat. Amazing. Great stuff, Emma.
Are we forking the repo that's called Blog Workshop?
No, sorry. So we are forking Not Another Pizza /site. So there's a link to it in the chat. I will.
Sorry, I wasn't. I was still editing my markdown a bit, so I missed a little bit.
No worries. I'm much the same. Like when I'm working on something like that, I'm like, oh, I just want to finish up these last few bits. So So Tibbs and I have just reposted the link.
Okay.
But it's in fact, I posted the wrong link. That's not helpful. I'm gonna get rid of my link. Look at Tibbs.
Oh yeah,
Tibbs
I've got it now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. So we want to go to the. I'll just jump back just to share that. So on the Not Another Pizza /site, and you'll be able to see that in the URL, and over here, we want to click the fork button in there. I can see lots of people are doing that because the fork number is going up. That's lovely. And I am just going to go back to my fork. Yes, and as Tibbs says, if you have questions, just ask. Like, there are lots of moving parts in this one, so don't worry about asking questions. So, hopefully pretty much everyone has a fork now. We're going to move on to our next step, which is in the browser, we're going to start editing this code to include our blog. And GitHub has a really useful tool for doing that, which is called Code Spaces. So to access that, I'm going to click on this green button at the top that says Code. And you'll see this menu pops open. We have local, which, as I mentioned before, is how you make changes locally. But today we're going to use Code Spaces, and edit the repo in our browser. So you'll see there's an option here to create a code space on main. So we're going to do that. I'm going to click create code space on main, and then I'm going to wait a few minutes for GitHub to create our code space. A code space is just an IDE, so that's an integrated development environment, which is basically just a fancy text editor for writing code. Code spaces is basically just VS Code, which is a very popular IDE from Microsoft and indeed from GitHub in the browser. So you'll see this takes quite a while to load, depending on your internet speed. It can take a few minutes, it might take 4 or 5, but we'll give this a second to catch up. Once CodeSpaces is mostly loaded, we're going to do a couple of quick things to set up our editor just to make things a little bit easier to work with. I'm going to increase my font size a little bit here. Hopefully this is nice and readable and clear. If it's too small for you, let me know. Over here, we have this like build with agent window, which I think is Copilot, which is GitHub's AI assistant. We're not going to need that, so we can just close it to give us as much screen real estate as possible. Thanks, Jibs. And then we are going to close the preview for README because we're not going to be editing that. So once CodeSpaces has loaded and we've closed these windows we don't need, you should be looking at something like this. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you should be able to see various folders and directories. And at the bottom, you should be able to see a terminal. If you've not used a terminal before, don't worry. A terminal is just a way of talking to a computer where instead of using a UI and clicking on things, you just type instructions. And we're going to be using that a little bit to publish our changes. So hopefully everyone's made it this far. I'll just pause for a second just so people struggling with slow internet connections can catch up. And also to sneak some water, obviously. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to the blog workshop just to talk through the next step to the repo that is. So we've done steps 1 and 2. So we've created our fork and we created a code space of that fork. And now we're going to create a new branch. How can we continue following the class if the code space doesn't open? Hopefully the code space should open in a few minutes. It can be very slow. So I would give it a couple of minutes and see if it catches up. If you are still stuck for a little while, you can always try editing locally, but hopefully it will catch up, at which point you should be able to keep following from the instructions where you left off. And I'll walk through nice and slowly, so hopefully you can catch this back up. So our next step is going to be creating a new branch. So I mentioned before we're on the main branch at the moment, which is the branch that we usually publish our changes or our code from. It's generally speaking best practice when you're working with a Git repo to work on a new branch. And sometimes this is called a feature branch. Sometimes it's called other things, but this is a new branch that we're going to make our specific changes on. And then when we're done making those changes, we're going to merge them back into the main branch so that they can be published. And we're going to do that in the terminal. So I'm going to copy this command, which is git checkout-b blog workshop, and I'm going to jump back to my code space. And then down here at the bottom of the screen, you can see I've got my terminal. I'm going to paste this command in, and I'm going to allow pasting in. And I'm just going to explain. Oh, I don't want the agent doing things. This is very annoying. Okay. I'm going to paste in this command. So let's talk through what this command is doing. So Git is a tool for interacting with Git repos. It lets us do all kinds of things like create branches, add sources of code, manage merging different branches together, and all kinds of wonderful things. We'll talk through a few of them in the next few minutes. And we're going to use a specific Git tool called checkout. And checkout in this instance is allowing us to change to a different branch. Passing the flag we're passing an argument here. And what that means is we're using this little -b flag. And that tells checkout, look, we're going to change to a branch and it's going to be a new branch. And the argument or the text that we're passing into that new branch is blog-workshop. So when we run this command, it will create a new branch called blog workshop, which is just a copy of what's in the main branch. And it will switch us from being in the main branch to being in the blog workshop branch. You can call this branch whatever you want, as long as it follows the rules for naming branches, which is usually, I think, no spaces and just regular Latin characters and hyphens. So if I run enter, we create our new branch and we switch. So I'll give everyone a second to catch up with that. But we are, do we all need a different branch name? So we don't need different branch names. This branch only exists on your fork. So everyone has a separate fork. So if everyone has a branch called blog-workshop, when we merge all of our forks back into the original repo, they all just go back into main. So it doesn't matter what your branch name is, basically, as long as it meets the rules for branch names. This is one of the reasons why forks are super useful, because it means you don't have to worry about anyone else's changes or clashing names or anything like that. You can just write code, merge it back, and worry about that on the merge. Awesome. Great question. Really good question. So our next step, and again, I'm going to come back to the blog workshop exercises just to remind myself, is that we're going to create a new markdown file in the posts directory. And we're going to title it something like this. So you'll see that we have a date at the start in reverse order, which is the year, the month, and the day. And then our blog title. Thanks, Donna. Our blog title in lowercase, or rather in camel case, with hyphens in between. So I'll show a specific example of this in a second. But one thing that's worth noting is you don't need your full blog title here. This only gets used in the name of this file. It isn't used anywhere else. And this is just to help you find this file later. So you can use a very short version of your blog title if you like here. So I'm going to copy this template for the markdown name and file name. And you can see an example of this on the right. And then I'm going to come back into code spaces. This step is a little bit fiddly, so keep a close eye. But I'm going to create a new file by going to the posts directory, or the posts folder over here on the left in the Explorer. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to click new file. And then you can see I get this box here where I can enter the file name. I'll just go through that again just because it's a little hard to see. You can also click on posts to select that directory, and then you can click on this little new file button at the top. I'm going to paste in the template name just to make it easier for me to fill out. And then I'm going to edit this to have today's date, 2026, and you can see how long I've been working on this workshop for. 2026, 03, it's today, the 17th. I think it's St. Patrick's Day today, that's fun. And then I'm going to say my title for the blog is Why Go to EMF. And then I'm going to press enter just to save that file name. So there you go. I will give everyone a second to catch up with that, but we are, as Tibbs has shared in the chat, we're going to create this file. It has the date at the start, and then a little short title with dashes or hyphens in between, like this. And it's importantly, it has .md at the end, which is the markdown file format. This date at the start is very important. So Jekyll uses this date to order posts on the feed. So if you wanted to schedule a post for the future or put a post before other posts on your blog, you can kind of fudge the numbers a bit here. But for now, we'll set this to today's date just to keep things simple. So hopefully everyone has been able to create a new branch and they have been able to create a markdown file with the right name. Give us a shout if you're stuck. But now we can start editing our blog in this editor. One thing we can do to make this easier for ourselves is I'm just going to scoot the terminal down a little bit. And then I'm going to right click on the file name over here in the top left. And I'm going to open a preview. You can also do this by pressing Shift Command V if you're on Mac. I think it might be Windows Shift V on Windows. I don't know. I've not used a Windows laptop in a long time. But if you right click on the name here and you click Open Preview, you'll see we get a preview window much like the one in our previous editor. Just to keep things super simple, I think we can then click on this and drag it over to the right-hand side of the screen. And now we get basically a recreation of our editor from earlier. So again, that is me right-clicking on the file name over here on the top left, clicking open preview, and then dragging the preview over onto the right-hand side. And this is just going to be a super way of us making sure that our markdown makes sense. Hopefully everyone's made it that far. Again, give us a wave if you're stuck. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Markdown Viewer, where I've written my Markdown previously. You can also go to your exported file. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to copy all of my Markdown with Control A to select everything and Control C to copy it. And then I'm going to come back to my code space, which I've lost. Here it is. Nope, this one. Cool. And I'm going to paste this Markdown onto the left-hand side of the screen. And I should see on the right my preview. So everyone should be at about this point. If you're having any trouble, give us a wave. But you should now see the preview of your blog, all of your Markdown on the left, and then we're ready to move on to the next step. So we're almost ready to publish our blog. We just need to add one more thing. Again, looking at the blog workshop instructions in step 6, we can see what we need to do next, which is we need to add something called front matter to the start of our blog. Front matter is just a very fancy name for like metadata or information about our blog that Jekyll's going to use to render it correctly. So we have this block of 6 lines here. We're going to copy and paste that, and we're going to paste it into the very beginning of our blog. So before our heading at the start, I'm going to paste this. You'll notice we have these 2 lines with 3 hyphens. These are called delimiters, and they tell Jekyll that everything in between the delimiters shouldn't appear in the page, and you will see in the preview that it doesn't. And inside of these delimiters is all of the information that Jekyll needs to render this post correctly. So you'll see that we are setting the layout as post, which is the blog post layout, and that will be the layout we see here, where we have the title at the start, the author, the date, and then the content underneath. We then have the title here, and this is super important to set. So this is the title that will actually be shown in the final website once the page is rendered. So I'm going to change this from my mini blog to why you should go to EMF camp. And then the author name. And I'm going to set that to Hugh. In these fields, you can use spaces, you can use hyphens and some other basic punctuation. So I'm going to save it as that. And so you'll notice, yeah, we've got layout post, we have our title that we've updated, we have our author that we've updated, and you'll notice at the bottom there's this category workshop. So in Jekyll, all of our posts go into the posts directory, but we have 2 different feeds. So we have this codebar workshop blog feed, and then also we have the main feed on the homepage of the website. So this this category just tells Jekyll which feed to put our blog post into. So we want to leave this as category workshop for now. Okay, so hopefully everyone should now have their Markdown opening code space with their draft blog and the front matter at the start with the title updated, the author name updated, and then everything else left the same. Again, give us a shout if you're stuck. So we are now pretty much ready to publish. I'm just going to have a little sip of water because I'm losing my voice.
Okay, I've got a question. Where can
Go
I
for it.
just find an image? I just want an image of someone typing, but where do you find images generally where you can just use the URL?
Sure. So there are a bunch of great resources for this. So if you just go to like free stock photo hands typing,
We can't
be a
see
great
your
example.
typing, Hugh. Just no, we can.
Okay, cool. So I could scroll down and find an image site like this. So I could use, like, for example, Pixabay. This seems okay. There are hands typing here. And so I'm going to right click on one of these images.
Oh, it's the right
Uh,
click.
yes, and then I'm going
Yeah,
to copy an image address,
I
and
get
then
that.
I
Yeah.
can put that image address into my markdown by pasting it in the parentheses here.
Fine. I forgot about the right click because I was thinking, how do you get it as the URL? Thank you.
No worries at all. It's a good question. Yeah, images is a really fiddly thing with markdown. Um, that's actually reminds me as well that another way of adding images, which I'll touch on briefly, is that you can link to them locally. So you see, like in my blog at the moment, I'm linking to this image elsewhere on the web. But if I wanted to include an image that's hosted on my website, you can see that we have this images directory down here. So if I click on images, you can see there's some different pictures in here already from some of the other blogs. And I'm going to, what's a fun image to include? Okay, yeah, so we have this stock photo image in here already. So if I want to include an image from that images directory, say if I put it right at the end, I can again insert an image link with an exclamation mark and square brackets. But this time, instead of putting in a web link, I'm going to put in the local path. So I'm going to do two full stops, which says look in the directory above the one I'm currently in, which is posts, and a slash. And you'll see that Codespaces helpfully suggests different things I could be linking to. I'm going to go to the images directory and I'm going to find the image I wanted to use, which is image.png. And you'll see now that that image gets dropped into the preview on the right. So those are two different options you have. So if your image is already available on the web, you can just link to it. That's a very easy way. Or you can copy and paste your image into the images directory here and add it using a path like this. And there are instructions for how to do that in the video that's attached and in the Markdown cheat sheet. Okay, so we should all now have our little mini log like this, all laid out with our Markdown and in the preview. Don't worry if you've not finished your mini blog yet. We can always come back and change it later. And indeed, that's one of our challenges at the end. But now I'm going to work on using Git, which is our version control system for talking to GitHub, to stage and upload these changes. So a great place to start with that is to again use the git command, but this time I'm going to use git status. I run git status. You can see all of the changes that we have made to our branch since we created our branch from the main branch. Sorry, you're going to be hearing the word branch a lot in the next few minutes. And you can see, look, the only change we have is that we created our new file in the post directory. You'll notice that this file is untracked. So this means that Git knows that we created this new file, but it's not planning on doing anything with it yet. What we're going to do is commit this change to Git. A commit is a way of basically taking a bunch of changes, bundling them up, a bit like when you save a version of a document in something like Google Docs, so that we can control the changes that we're making over time. And the way we do that is we add our changes first that tells Git that we want to add them to the next commit. There's a couple of different ways of doing this. The easiest is to use something like git add full stop. This just tells Git to add all of the changes that are in the current directory level and everything that's underneath. If you only want to add like a specific file, you could also say git add, and then you could copy the path to that file. And then by pressing enter and running it, we add change. You'll notice now that if I run git status again, look, we now have a tracked change ready to be committed, which is our new file. So hopefully everyone has been able to add that okay. Our next step is to commit the change. And that tells GitHub, look, we've made a bunch of new changes. We're effectively saving a new version. And that these changes are something that we want to use later. So to do that, I'm going to use git commit to commit the changes. And I'm going to, again, use a flag with an argument, which is -m. M is telling git commit that we want to set a message. And a message is just a way of reminding us what we were changing in this. So you can think of this almost as like a file name. And much in the way of like editing on text documents locally, you might end up with like a, v1, v2, v3, whatever, like final. But I'm just going to say for now, added a blog about EMF. And again, you can see we have git commit at the start, which is the git command we're using, m, which is saying that we're passing in the message argument, and then a message in speech marks that says that we are adding a blog about EMF. If I press enter, then Git will commit those changes. So we've created a new commit with the message of added a blog about EMF with the one file changed in it, and you can see the changes inside of that. I can run a command now called git log, which will show me all of the commits that have ever been made to this repo. And you can see, look, the topmost commit is added a blog about EMF. And we've made that on our blog workshop branch. And then all of the other commits are from when this branch was origin main over at the Not Another Pizza repo that we forked. And I can close git log just by pressing Q. So we should now have a new commit with our blog in it. And we can double check to make sure that we've not missed any changes by again running git status. And you'll now see that there's nothing to commit. Our working tree is clean. Like we have all of the changes we've made committed and ready to go. If you still see your file here, come back to this git add step and double check to make sure that you've added the correct file. Okay, so we're now ready to push our changes to GitHub. So we're on right now is what is called a local branch. So this is local to our machine, or in this case, it's local to the Codespaces server. But we want to push the changes to the remote branch, which is the version of the repo that you see in your browser. I'm going to do that by running git push. It would help if I spelled it correctly. So I can type git push. I'm going to run that, but you'll notice that that does not work. So we have a fatal error. And this is that the current branch, Blog Workshop, has no upstream branch. What this means is that on the remote, we don't yet have a branch called Blog Workshop for us to push our changes to. Luckily, Git is very helpful, and it gives us the command we need to fix this, which is git push. And again, we're passing arguments. But this time, the argument we're passing is set upstream. So this means that when we push, we will explicitly create the branch based on the name to follow. Origin is just the name Git uses for the remote branch. So the origin in this case is github.com, your username, Not Another Pizza site. And the branch name we're going to create is Blog Workshop. So if I copy this command and I paste it into my terminal, and then I run that, after a few moments, my new commit will be pushed to the remote, and we will have created a new branch on the remote as well. So you can see all of that information is here. Now, do give us a shout if you're having any trouble up to this stage, but hopefully now everyone should have pushed their commit with their blog and their new branch to the remote. And you'll notice that in the terminal, we have a message that says you can create a pull request for Blog Workshop by visiting this link. So you can click on this link to do just that. No, because you need to GitHub. Cool. And it has opened it here. Don't worry if you missed that terminal message, you can do the exact same thing by coming over to your forked repo and refreshing the page. And coming over to pull requests, new pull request, and then comparing your Blog Workshop branch to main. And then you should be able to see your blog and all the other changes you made here. I'm going to jump back over to the one we created with the clickable link. At the top of the page, you'll notice that we have our base repository over here on the left. So this is the original Not Another Pizza site that we forked. We're pushing to the main branch, excuse me, which is, or rather Tibbs, they'll need to go to their own fork repo, I think, which is an awkward distinction. We're on the main branch, which is the one we're publishing from. And where we're bringing our code from is our fork, which is the username here, and then site, and then Blog Workshop, which is the branch that we created our changes on. You'll notice that our commit message has become the title of the PR here, very helpfully, which is added a blog about EMF, and that we have some options down here for adding a description. This is useful for explaining to maintainers exactly what it is that we're doing with our PR. This PR is very simple, but if you're making lots of big changes, then you might want to explain what you're doing. Thanks, Tids. And then if we scroll down, we can see all of the commits in our pull request and all of the changes we made. In this case, just adding this one file with the date at the top, front matter and knockdown. I think we can potentially do the preview. I'm not sure. Cool. So all of that looks good. And hopefully everyone has managed to follow along to this point and has a commit here, their file with the changes, and the title at the top. So once you've done all of that, you can create a pull request by with these changes by clicking this green button down the bottom and click Create Pull Request. You can't see that pull page. Okay, so I'll run through this one more time because this is very fiddly. So I'm going to go back to my fork. So this should be, let's refresh this just to simplify that. In fact, let's get rid of. Okay, so I'm going to go to repositories in my GitHub account. I'm going to go to my fork of site. So you should see in the bar at the top of the screen, it's github.com, your GitHub username, and then /site. So you want to be in this repo. Then from your fork in GitHub, you're going to go to pull requests. You're going to go to new pull request. And then in this comparing changes view, you're going to pick your blog workshop branch by clicking on where it says compare main and changing the branch to blog workshop. And when you do that, you should see your blog name, your commit message rather, and the contents of your blog. So hopefully that makes sense. Do shout if you're having any trouble with that.
Yeah, could you just go one step back? Sorry, I'm trying to look at your screen and mine at the same time.
No worries.
You just 2 steps back where you said change to something. I'm looking at my new pull bit.
Awesome. So let's do that. So so to get to that point, I've gone pull requests, new pull request. So you should be seeing something like this.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
Awesome. So you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, this is where we're asking people to pull our changes to. So not another pizza /site is the repo that we forked initially and is the one that the website is deployed from. Main is the branch of that repo that it's deployed from. And then on the right, you should see head repository, and it should say something like your GitHub username /site. And next to it, compare, is the branch of that repo that we're basically kind of pushing over onto the original public one. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on where it says compare main and change it to blog workshop down here at the bottom. I'll just do that one more time. So if you click on compare main, you should see a list of all of the branches on your fork, and you're going to click blog workshop. Perfect. Amazing. Thanks, Emma. It's one of the fiddliest bits, so good to go through it a couple of times. And then you should see your commit message and your changed file in here. And then right at the top, there's this big green button that says create pull request, and we're going to click that. And again, in here, we'll see our commit message. It's the title of the PR. We'll see the information about what branch we're pull requesting to where, and all of our changes at the bottom. One thing that's also worth noting here is over on the right, you'll see all of your reviewers. So these are the people who will look at pull requests and approve them or give feedback on them or potentially suggest other changes to get your pull request merged. And we'll see in the next step that once we click create pull request again, that we get shown the pull request page. And you immediately see this like big red X. So don't worry about that. That's just GitHub saying, hey, if you want to merge code from your fork to the Not Another Pizza repo, you need one of the reviewers, one of the maintainers rather, to review your code to say that it's safe to merge. So what happens now is once you create your pull request, the lovely Tibbs and my friend Leo and myself will receive an email saying, hey, someone is raising a pull request. They would like to add some code to your repo. Please take a look. And they will see something like this, where they can view all of your changes, and then they can leave comments and feedback. So I think, depending on how I've set up my GitHub permissions, I can review my own code. Although I'm just going to ask Tibbs, are you okay to give me a review on my pull request?
I can do that right now. 1 second.
It would be very funny if you marked it as rejected.
I don't have that sentence.
And for everyone else, once you've hit create pull request and you're looking at the screen with a red X, you'll also be waiting, as I am now, for Tibbs or for myself to come through and approve your PR before you can merge it. So we're just going to, I feel like I put you on the spot here, Tibbs. I feel terrible. This in general, like in the process of contributing to GitHub repos or to blogs, is like an awesome time to like go grab a coffee, go grab a drink. Like sometimes getting a pull request reviewed will take a few minutes. More typically, it's a very long time, sometimes like weeks or months for bigger projects, but hopefully we should be able to review and merge everyone's today. I'm now noticing that I have probably set up permissions wrong, and that's something I will fix.
I think I've only got read
okay.
Read permissions.
I shall fix that momentarily. I can go through and approve everyone's PRs for today. The base repo, Habad, should be not another pizza main. So the base repo should automatically be not another pizza, and the base branch should be main. So it should look a little bit like this. And then the source repo should be your GitHub username, and the source branch should be blog workshop. Amazing. So Tibbs has approved my PR, but I've set up the permissions wrong on the organization. That I will fix. Because I am the admin, though, I can just mark my own homework and bypass the rules and merge. Not typically best practice, but we'll do that for today until I fix the permissions for our facilitators. Once your pull request has been reviewed and approved, you should see a green button that says merge, and you can click that. I've just merged it myself. So once you have merged your PR, you are pretty much done. There's nothing left for you to do. GitHub takes over from here on out, and I'll show you what I mean by that by clicking on Actions. So over in the Actions tab, GitHub Actions being something you can learn a lot more about at the next workshop today, which looks fantastic, which is about creating your first GitHub action. You'll see that GitHub is running this action, which is basically a job on a small server that GitHub makes available for free. And GitHub is running a Jekyll build, which is taking everything we've written in Markdown and using the Jekyll static site generator to turn it into HTML. So if I scroll through here, I could probably find my blog. Yep. Why go to EMF? And then you'll see that there are a couple of other steps. So there's building the HTML, there's deploy, which is copying it to the web host, which is GitHub Pages in this case. And there's a little report status, which is letting you know, look, we've successfully deployed to the blog. Having done all of that, if I now come over to Not Another Pizza, and I again go to the workshop blog feed, you can see that my blog has been published. So there we go. Hopefully, everyone should now have a pull request created. If you're having any trouble, give us a shout. You can see there's my EMF blog. I now am going to have a quick look at some of our pull requests as they're coming in. So I'm going to pop back over to pull requests in Not Another Pizza site, and I can see everyone is adding their blogs. Fantastic stuff. So I'm going to work through these one at a time. If you have any questions, give us a shout in the chat. Just going to quickly see how we're doing for workshop time. Perfect. So we are pretty much bang on time. So what I will do, just in the interest of time, is I will review these pull requests after the session today. So keep an eye out in your email, and you'll be able to merge these and see them on the blog. But that is basically a wrap for our session. So hopefully everyone should have a pull request now. I really hope that you enjoyed this session. If you did, and you'd like to do more blog writing, or you'd like to have a go at creating your own blog site with GitHub Pages, I have 2 challenges for you. So the first challenge is to write and publish a blog post. Pick a topic you find interesting. It could be your mini blog idea from today, or it could be something else, and have a go at writing a full-length blog. Like explore all of the ideas from your abstract, deep dive into everything, build a strong conclusion, and write and publish a blog and share it with people for feedback. Like, that is your challenge number one. If you take me up on that challenge, please do share your blogs with me. I'd love to see them. Your second challenge, which is a little bit harder, but I think if you work through all these steps today, I'm confident you'll be able to do it, is to host your own blog site with GitHub Pages. So this is going to be the process of creating a repo in your GitHub account, setting up a static site generator project, which is usually as simple as copying a template or a quick start, and then enabling GitHub Pages, and then hosting the whole thing with GitHub Pages. Again, if you work through this workshop, I think you'll be able to do this just fine. And definitely check out the GitHub Actions workshop later today, because that will really help with this challenge. And again, if you make your own blog using this workshop, please let me know. I'd love to see it. Oh, I'm not sharing the right screen. I'm sorry. Okay, here are the challenges. Both of these challenges are in the instructions repo. There are not step-by-step instructions, but there are links to great resources that will help you do these things. So please do give them a go. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this workshop today. I hope it was useful. This is my first time doing a workshop on blogging, so I hope it was okay. I'd like to thank Tibbs both for all of their wonderful support in the session today, and also as one of the reviewers of this project, including Ellie Geddes, my long-suffering partner who helped me test out this workshop, Leo Riviera, who kindly volunteered me to run the session, and my other colleague, Ivan J. Miller, who is awesome and does a bunch of fantastic stuff with Black Python devs, the organization he runs, and also help review this session. For further reading, I can't recommend enough Writing for Developers, Blogs That Get Read. This is, as I said, the book before by Beata Sana and Cynthia Dunlop. It's great. I think it's very reasonably priced. I think it's like $10 or something, so do check it out. And finally, as promised, this blog workshop is under the Not Another Pizza organization. Not Another Pizza is a community of community organizers. We're loosely centered in London, but we are an international community. We have members in the US. If you head over to notanother.pizza website, you can join our Discord. If you are someone who is looking for support on community organizing, looking for venues, that kind of thing, we'd love to help you out. Why do we have a workshop about publishing blogs? Because lots of the members of our organization are interested in doing that, which is why we're trying to help people learn how. So hopefully this session was useful. As one final ask before we wrap up, can I go to my final slide? Cool. Please let me know your thoughts on this session. You can message me separately if you'd like. If there's anything that didn't make sense or anything you'd like to give feedback on, that would be amazing. But yeah, if you could leave a rating, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming today, and I hope that was useful. And thank you, Tibbs.